I remember many Thanksgiving dinners around the dining room table. We were model cousins. We never got into any trouble. And I remember on those Thanksgiving dinners that it was a very English form of service. And Uncle Staff would carve, the plates would go down to Auntie Betty for the vegetables, and then pass to us, and thank God the gravy was hot. Brenda and I reconnected when she moved to Calgary. She came for dinner, or we went out for dinner, enjoying some fine food and some fine wine. Of course, we had to catch up on the family news with her siblings and my siblings. My husband, Ron, loved to tease her. The first time she came to our house for dinner, she was wearing this gorgeous linen dress. And he looked at her and he said, "We have flour sacks like that on the farm. I could have made you a dress." We had some fierce conversations about healthcare and politics. Surprise. She was a loyal conservative in every sense of the word in my book. She often called to see what was new as she was driving out to ride her horse. Brenda had one trait that is definitely a family trait. Cousins, please don't take offense. It could be said she was secretive. Not necessarily a bad trait. Although, I believe it was because, and it has been said before today, she compartmentalized her life. She would rather talk about you than talk about herself. She had many interests: her work, her politics, her horse, her friends. Nobody mentioned her cat yet. She loved to entertain, and she loved to travel. Her happy place was Palm Springs. She loved to ride a horse and to enjoy the company of friends. COVID, unfortunately, canceled her plans for travel abroad, and that did infuriate her. Our families, as Brent said, had a mini reunion at my sister Christine's 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Brenda had been her flower girl. The last time I saw Brenda was to celebrate her 60th birthday at Wellington's. We talked about her trip to the coast to celebrate with Brent and family. The last time I spoke to Brenda was March the 8th, International Women's Day. Very appropriate, as she was an international woman through both her work and her play. We had a laugh, we shed a tear. I told her I loved her, and she said the same to me. She knew that if she needed me, I would be there. And then she was gone. May Brenda's memory be a blessing to all who knew her. Rest in peace, dear cousin. You were taken too soon.
Brenda had moved from Regina to Winnipeg, where she continued to engage in politics. Then she settled in Calgary in the mid-90s and called it home. Prior to opening her own business, Brenda worked in a series of fields that all prepared her for her own success. She was with Theatre Calgary, Calgary International Organ Festival, and eventually she found her role in communications and government relations and landed at the Calgary Health Region. This was truly the jumping off spot for her to soar in a communications sector. I would like to ask Roman Cooney to come and say a few words about his days with Brenda and the teams he had worked with on her and the lifelong friendship that they developed. Roman.
Thank you. Deal. Folks, you must brace yourself now for the certainty that what follows will sound more like a roast than a eulogy. That's what Brenda would want from me. That's why I loved her, and that's just how it's going to be. My only regret is that this will be the first, last, and only time I have the last word. Over or so, think about that, 20 years, that we worked together, B2 as we knew her. I've never heard this B squared thing. B2. We often had lively discussions. As you've heard, apparently it's Barootes' family received wisdom, something to do with politics, and the whole point of having a dinner table conversation, that Greeks are the most disputatious people on earth. Brenda was inordinately happy to make this claim, and I beg to differ, because surely that distinction belongs to the Irish. We often discuss the virtues of cats versus dogs. On that point, I'll just say that Archie and I eventually made our peace, although our dog Mowgli took an immediate liking to Brenda, which was not always the case with our dinner guests. I'm not saying that Brenda was argumentative, no, because she didn't need to be. Brenda was, instead, charmingly, endearingly, disarmingly, brilliantly persuasive. And usually right, except as I've already noted. Of course, we had much more important things to discuss in our work together through one crisis after another in healthcare, and then advanced education, where she joined me at the U of C, in oil and gas, where we did some work together in CAP, and all kinds of other things. When I first hired Brenda in communications in GR, and what was then, as you've heard, the Calgary Health Region, I just left a 2-decade career in journalism at the Calgary Herald. Surprised to discover that I knew almost nothing about public service, trust, and teamwork, and even less about how government really works. As the saying goes, how the sausages are made. Recognizing that I was completely out of my depth, Brenda became my GR Sherpa. Many of you here tonight, and it's great to see folks that I haven't seen in so many years, will remember the formation of Calgary Health Region as a unique time for those who experienced and came to embrace and believe in the power of trust and teamwork. I haven't seen anything like it since. I hadn't seen anything up to that point. I don't ever think I'll see something like that in my lifetime. Brenda and I and our teams were proud to have played a small part in creating that culture. True, Brenda was generally soft-spoken, but unflinchingly honest, which I respected, admired, and came to understand as the cornerstone of trust. She also loved to be unbelievably cheeky, which I dearly loved and desperately missed. Brenda was our touchstone for integrity. Her strength was plain language over blah, 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 and blind obedience. In our business, among our peers and colleagues, that mattered. Now, at this point, I can hear Brenda remind me to simply say what we used to preach, which was this: always know the difference between shit and shinola, and never believe your own spin. Over the years, we worked together on and off whenever we could. Me, an itinerant wordsmith for hire, and Brenda, the consummate GR pro, capable of adapting at will, always willing to step up, but never wavering in her principles. She was fearless, and she was fiercely loyal. That matters still. We learned from it, we drew strength from it, and we were better at our jobs and better people for it. Obviously, we became friends because Brenda also knew just when to walk into my office, to offer a hug, because we did not choose easy career paths. And let me tell you, as you probably heard, healthcare is bloody stressful. Now, Brenda could be persuaded, but it was sporadic. Sitting on our deck one afternoon a few years ago, I invited her to take my tractor for a little spin around the property. It It took maybe, 10 seconds to convince her. Then she crashed it, and I have the video evidence, but it was worth it because, man, what a movie. Still, when I learned she was taking horseback riding lessons in England, show jumping no less, it took me a year, a full darn year, for Brenda to agree to do just one simple thing for me. I just couldn't convince her. Finally, imagine this. After a long, sunny summer evening, maybe a couple of glasses of wine, who knows, she eased her Beamer out of our driveway, lowered the top on her convertible, looked over with that grin. You know that grin, you've all seen it. She waved and she yelled, and I mean yelled, "Tally ho!" I was inordinately pleased. Brenda's all too brief sojourn with Sophie says all you need to know about her love for a little adventure in her life, as in work. But I'm leaving that to others tonight. Okay, Brent told me I'm on the clock. And right about now, Brenda would be saying, "That's enough, Cooney. You need a good editor." Just this once, I will yield the point. Since last winter, I've tried to understand why Brenda's absence from our lives is so distressing. I finally realized it was because months could go by without us connecting, and all I ever really needed to know was that she would be there if I needed her for work or our friendship. And she always was, and now she's not, and I just can't fathom that. I briefly considered having you all yell "Tally ho" with me, but you can relax. There's a limit, even for me. Instead, I'd like to close by sharing a memory from the last evening that Debbie and I spent with Brenda. I know you can picture this because it's already there in your mind's eye. It was Christmas Day. Brenda was curled up in the corner of a couch in front of the fire, taking up less space than Archie, trying to absorb enough heat to get her through the winter, or at least until she could book a flight to Palm Springs. It had been uncharacteristically quiet and peaceful that Christmas Day. I think we were all simply content to be able to be with a few of the people we loved in the midst of this wretched pandemic. I don't remember what we talked about, but it doesn't matter. As always, Brenda would have been reflective, generous, thoughtful. In a word, gracious. And so I will always remember Brenda's gentle presence, and I'm grateful that it is with us still. Tally ho, you too. Tally ho.
Up next, and as I said, don't hesitate to get up, get a drink, get some food. But up next is a video of Brenda's close friends and soul sisters. This group of women were inseparable. They were called the ITT. Most attended the celebration of life in Regina earlier this week, and this was part of their message. The video says it all, so I will play the video. When Brenda was young, as you heard, horseback riding was a big part of her life. And you heard it a few times already. When she left Regina to head off to Brentwood College for grade 11 and 12, she turned in her saddle for a field hockey stick. But in the past several years, Brenda returned to riding, as you heard my niece Rebecca reference in her video. It was her place of solace, her place to be free. For her love of her horse Sophie, and the folks that ran and used the barn south of town here. That was of great comfort to her, prior to and during her cancer treatments. It was truly a place of comfort for her. I would like to ask Mike Dummer to come up and say a few words on behalf of all the staff and barn members and those who rode and interacted with Brenda in her place of peace these last several years. Mike.